So I understand that, that you and many people share your view that they believe that Israel is perpetrating a genocide on Gaza. And you talk about wanting to eliminate the people of Gaza. But surely that clip that I played, when you talk about the Israelis having to go back to where they come from.
If they could apologise for what they do. Obviously...
No, but Roger, let me ask a question.
Okay.
In this video, Piers Morgan panics as Roger Waters calls out his delusions. So this debate gets really uncomfortable really fast. Piers tries to spin the conversation around one of Roger's old comments about Israel's going back where they came from, hoping to trap him into some kind of apology or get him labeled as anti-Semitic on the spot, but Roger's not having any of it. He just flips it right back at him. And the more Roger pushes back, talking about equal rights, universal law, and the literal humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the more Piers just starts scrambling to shift the topic, throw in gotcha history, or fall back on the usual media script. But none of it works. Roger's just laser-focused, emotional, and just totally unwilling to let Piers derail the conversation away from the suffering that's still happening right now. So make sure to watch till the end to see how Piers Morgan panics as Roger Waters calls out his delusions.
On that point of wherever you come from, back to Eastern Europe, wherever you come from, to tell 7 million people to go back where they come from, many people would view that as racist, and in the case of Israelis, to be anti-Semitic, something you've been accused of being. Now, do you understand why they would take it that way?
Absolutely, of course I do. We have to remember that most of the population of Israel are young, much younger than me, even younger than you, if such a thing was possible. And they have been pretty well brainwashed into believing that they are superior to the other people who live there. And I have to say, the thing about Eastern Europe or Northeastern Europe and the United States, they've tried to sell us this idea that somehow they are biblical people and that God has given them the land. That's what the Christian evangelicals believe.
Well, look,
All I'm saying is that they're not indigenous people, most of them. There are a few of the Jewish people who are citizens of Israel who are indigenous to the area. But back in the 19th century, that was only 7 or 8% of the population.
Can I respond?
Yes, of course.
So ancient Egyptian records mention Israel from 1213 BC. Religious literature records Israelites as far back as 1500 BC. As far as many Jewish people are concerned, this is where they come from. Right, within Judaism, Israel is the Holy Land. It's the land where the faith began. Jerusalem is the holy city. For Jews, Jerusalem is at the core of their faith and their world. Now, I believe you're an atheist. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you may not understand or accept that, but that is how millions of people in Israel feel. They believe this is their original holy land. Now, I think that the displacement of the Palestinians back in 1948 was appalling. I also think the simultaneous virtually displacement of many Jewish people from their homes was also appalling. All of it was appalling. And you can create a narrative that would be supportive of both sides and critical of the other sides. But there's no doubting that Jewish people believe this is their holy land too, in the way that many Palestinians.
So Piers kicks things off by pushing hard on that line Roger once said about Israelis going back to Eastern Europe, framing it as anti-Semitic. He's clearly trying to put Roger on the defensive, but Roger just doesn't backpedal at all. He says sure, he gets why people might take it that way, but then he shifts the conversation back to reality, explaining how most Israelis aren't indigenous, and how so many have been conditioned into believing they're superior to Palestinians. Then Piers does what he always does. He dives into history, starts bringing up Egyptian records from the past, ancient Israelite references, and religious ties to the land. But Roger's not here to debate about scripture or historical claims. He stays focused on what's happening right now. Apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and a population that's under siege.
I haven't read that book, I admit. And I'm not sure I want to, because I've only got a few years. Well, how many years I've got left is
You're doing
irrelevant.
better than the President of the United States, aren't you?
I beg your pardon?
You're doing a lot better than the President of the United States.
Yes, I am.
Your mental acuity appears to be much sharper.
Anyway, let me finish. All of what you're saying, though, may well be fascinating to historians and Jewish scholars and scholars of other religions, but it's completely irrelevant to the genocide that is going on now in the West Bank and Gaza.
But it's not irrelevant to why Jewish people, when you say you should...
It's not irrelevant to why they think they have a right to commit genocide.
No, I didn't say that. Don't misquote me.
What is all this stuff from Egypt?
No, I'm just going to say that, again, referring to the quote from your own mouth, when you say to 7 million people, go back to Eastern Europe or the United States or wherever you came from, many will believe, if not most of people in Israel will believe, that this is where they originally came from.
What I say in that little video is, I think you made a terrible mistake, and I think you should now say, we're sorry, it was a terrible mistake. Just look at what's happened. This is obviously a completely failed experiment. Zionism, the whole thing, is a failed experiment, and we're going to leave you to live your lives in your country. Maybe a few of us will stay, or maybe we'll all stay, but we all have to live together with equal rights from the river.
But this new state, to be clear, would be...
Hang on. Let me finish. That's all. I.e., I'm going to keep dragging this conversation back to these two things. Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the genocide that the state of Israel is committing on the Palestinian people. And I don't care about what your history books from Egypt. I'm not saying you're wrong. I haven't read them. And frankly, I couldn't care less.
But I thought you did care about reading and getting more knowledgeable.
See, there you go. You're so clever.
Well, I just remembered what you said. It's not that clever. It just says I've got a good memory.
Do you know what? No, you're right. It wasn't that clever.
Okay. Look, let's go back to...
No, let's stay on the genocide. It's either right, it's either all right or it's not. And it doesn't matter what happened in the history of the Israelites.
I'm coming to this.
Okay.
Let's go back to October the 7th, 2023, when the Hamas attacks occurred. George Galloway was here last week, and he described them as terror attacks. Do you agree with that?
I'm not going to have this conversation. I've seen you have it with everybody, and you're. It's a waste of time.
Why?
Because you always reach the same conclusions, and you always waste 10 or 12 minutes.
Let's waste 1 minute. All I ever ask people is, do you condemn what Hamas did?
So this stretches where Roger completely flips the power dynamic. When Piers brings up ancient history again, Roger just shuts it down, saying it might matter to scholars, but it's irrelevant to what's happening right now in Gaza. He calls Zionism a failed experiment and brings the focus back to equal rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But Piers just keeps pushing him for a soundbite, trying to trap him on the "go back to Europe" quote, or bait him into condemning Hamas. But Roger just doesn't play along. He says he condemns all civilian killings, period. But he refuses to let that derail the real issue: Israeli war crimes and systemic violence.
I condemn the killing of civilians, always, whoever does it, wherever it is. I condemn war crimes. If Hamas committed war crimes on October the 7th, I condemn them. You referred earlier... You referred earlier to my conversation with Glenn Greenwald, which happened in December last year, and I was taken to task after that, because on his programme, and this was only a few weeks after October the 7th, I said, I would love to know what happened on October the 7th, so that we can all have a proper... Well, the Israelis won't allow any investigation.
You suggested it might be a false flag operation.
Well,
implying that Israel created it.
Hang on. Maybe false flag's not exactly the right word, but why did
it's obviously not
hang
the right
on.
word.
Can I finish?
Yeah, but you're wrong.
All right, never mind.
Roger. It obviously wasn't a false flag. And the reason we know that is that Hamas broadcast in real time through video to social media what they were doing. There's nothing false flag about it.
I'm not saying that part of the Palestinian resistance movement didn't cross that wire fence into what's called...
2,000 of them
Hang on. Or 2,000, however many. It doesn't really matter how many it was. I'm not saying they didn't do that. I'm not saying that didn't happen at all. What I'm saying is, there's all this talk about, does Israel have a right to defend itself? Why didn't Israel defend itself that morning? Why did they wait 7 hours before they started machine gunning?
Well, it was a catastrophic failure of defence and security.
And this is the most efficient security.
Yeah, it's catastrophic. That's why when this is over,
all right, you don't want to have that conversation, neither do I, but wouldn't it be
I just
great...
answered you what I think
Hang
happened.
on, wouldn't it be great to have that conversation at some... And wouldn't it be great if we could have an actual real investigation beyond the very good Al Jazeera documentary that we all saw that came out, and all the great work that the Grey Zone and Electronic Intifada and people did in debunking all the filthy, disgusting lies that the Israelis told after October the 7th.
Like what?
About burning babies and women being raped, which were all completely...
Actually, women were raped.
No, they weren't.
Yes, they were.
Well, there's no evidence.
It's been established by the
You
United
can say
Nations.
anything that you want, but there's no evidence.
Actually, there is extensive evidence.
There is no
of sexual
evidence.
assault and rape.
So Roger wraps things up by demanding answers, not just about October 7th, but about Israel's baffling security failure and the stream of unverified, emotionally charged claims that dominated headlines afterwards. And the moment he pushes back on those narratives, Piers just drops the mask, interrupting, deflecting, and leaning on outrage instead of evidence. Piers is clearly biased towards defending Western-aligned narratives and Israeli state actions. Speaking of bias, are you getting tired of getting news from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite? How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, whether it's left, right, or center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get a 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights in media bias and political trends. So stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.